So welcome to today's #Wednesdays weekly session. It's a Meet the Funder session, and we're going to be introducing the National Lottery Fund, the Reaching Communities Fund, and we've got Georgie Oliver who is going to be presented. So I'm going to hand over to Georgie.
Great, thanks Roma. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Can you all see that? All good. Brilliant. Okay. So yeah, thanks for coming today, everyone. It's great to see you on the call today. As Roma said, my name's Georgie and I'm the local funding officer for Tameside. I also cover Stockport as well. And although I just cover those two areas, I do sort of work really closely with the other funding officers based in Greater Manchester as well and across the Northwest. So I've got sort of a bit of a knowledge on the other patches within Greater Manchester, but Tameside and Stockport are the main ones for me. Yeah, like Roma said, if you've got any questions, feel free to just pop them in the chat, stick your hand up, shout out, whatever's best for you. We do have a sort of dedicated Q&A sort of slot at the end, so if you wanted to wait until then, that's also fine. But yeah, so here's a little overview of the agenda and sort of the main things we're going to be covering this morning. So the main purpose of today's session is to just help improve people's understanding of our core funding programs and how to apply to them. We've made some sort of, since our relaunch in December, we've made some slight changes as a result of sort of previous learning and alongside learning from the pandemic. So it's just to sort of bring you up to speed with them as well. One thing that I would stress is, although this presentation will make reference to Awards for All, the majority of the content is focused on reaching communities, as this is managed by our local team and it's the program that I work on. So I can kind of offer a brief sort of answer to any Awards for All questions, but I think if you have got any, they're best directed to our advice line and our advice team. And their contact details are included at the end of this slide, or they're on the website as well. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of information about the National Lottery Community Fund. So we're a non-departmental public body delivering public funds. So we work at arm's length from the government, although we are ultimately accountable to Parliament and the public for our activities. The income of all the lottery distributors comes from the sale of national lottery tickets, and of every £2 spent on a ticket, 56p goes to good causes. The Community Fund is the largest of the distributors, and we're responsible for distributing 40% of funds raised for good causes as well. And then on this slide here, you can just see sort of some local context about how much we invest into Greater Manchester each year. So we invest around £21 million per year, and we're currently supporting over 1,300 organisations. This is across all our funding programmes. This isn't just Awards for All and Reaching Communities, that's across all live programmes that we have. So our purpose, we support people and communities to thrive. And we know that people understand what's needed in their communities better than anyone. And that's why we listen, collaborate and fund so that good things can happen. We firmly believe that when people are in the lead, communities thrive. So that's why we want your funding proposal to demonstrate this clearly and show how people and communities have been involved right from the start. And although there are sort of many principles which underpin our people in the lead framework, we usually consider three things. So the first one is an organisation people-led. It's really important to us that you involve your community in the design, delivery and development of the activities you're planning. So when you're thinking about putting in an application, you might want to ask yourself a few questions. You know, have you spoken to the people in your community? Have the people in your community told you what they need and what's important to them? Have you listened to them and used what they've said to create your project? And more importantly, what can you do to find out what's important to people during the pandemic? Secondly, is, does it build on people's strengths? So we want to see you encouraging people who benefit from your project to get more involved in running the organisation and making decisions. So for example, you could have service users that could become trustees or volunteers. You could find ways to employ them within your organisation, or you could support them with further training or skills development. These are all things that build on people's strengths. And then lastly, are they connected in their community? So we want to know that you've got a good understanding of other activities and services in your community and how you'll complement these and add value to what's already there. You know, so you could speak to other groups in the area who are sort of doing similar work to you and think about how maybe you could all work together and help each other out. It's all about sort of having that awareness in your community of what's going on and making sure that you're not duplicating what's already happening, what's already going on. We want to see groups that are sort of filling gaps and really adding value to a community. I have included a link at the bottom of this page to a video which goes into further detail about people in the lead and the type of projects that we fund. I won't play it now because it's over 10 minutes long, but the slides are going to be shared after this session. So please feel free to go and have a look at that video when you can. I thought it'd be good to include maybe a case study example as well of people in the lead. So the one here is an example of an organisation who were recently funded through Reaching Communities. So Organisation A are an arts and mental health organisation. They support people suffering from addiction, people with long-term health issues, families, elderly residents, and vulnerable children and young people. The beneficiary groups at the organisation are vast, so to ensure the services are offered effectively meet the needs of these beneficiaries, the organisation uses a mix of formal and informal feedback sessions with service users to support with the co-designing of activities. Not only has this led to more impactful services that meet community need, but has improved relationships and built trust between the organisation and participants. More recently, the organisation have made a conscious effort to incorporate user voice further into their work, going beyond initial project development. They now have a steering group consisting of staff, volunteers and service users, and a board including ex-service users, allowing them to shape the direction of the organisation's work and continuously develop as the needs of communities change. This has led to the sharing of different skill sets and the development of several participant and volunteer-led workshops. So you can see in this block here sort of some really good examples of how the organisation have included the community in the design, delivery and development of their work, but also the benefits of doing so. It's not just benefited service users, it's also benefited the organisation as well. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our approach as a funder. So we know that communities come in all shapes and sizes, and the National Lottery Community Fund is for everyone, but we need to ensure that we're reaching out to those that maybe don't think that we are for them. We're a really flexible funder. We always have been, but in response to the pandemic, we're now even more flexible as well. It's not just what we'll fund that's flexible, but our grant making processes have been refreshed and redesigned to be more flexible for applicants, sort of allowing our processes to adapt to the different types of funding that your organisation might need, particularly whilst responding to and recovering from the pandemic. Because of this, we'll make sure that we take a proportionate approach to assessment and grant management, all based on the scale, size, complexity and the amount that you've requested for. You know, we recognise that it's not a one size fits all process. So, you know, for example, we wouldn't expect the same level of detail and information to be provided by a group that wanted £50,000 every year, as opposed to one that wanted £500,000 over 5 years. It's your local funding officer's role to assist you with that, so that you know how much information we need, sort of regarding the level of planning required and the amount of information that you need to submit. We've still got a conversationalist approach as well, despite all the lockdown restrictions, and we are hoping to get back to sort of face-to-face meetings soon, but it all depends on sort of local restrictions. But if your idea is a good fit with our priorities, we'll talk to groups so that we can fully understand what you want from us. And if you are successful in being awarded funding, we'll keep talking to you about how you're progressing with your project right up until you spent all the money. So moving on to our priorities in England then. So we have three main funding priorities in England. all which came out of discussions with our grant holders, stakeholders and organisations across the voluntary sector, and we asked them where they think we can add most value and what's important for their communities. And these are the 3 ones that we came up with. So we've got stronger relationships, shared and sustainable places and spaces, and early action to prevent problems and tackle disadvantage. And these priorities are the same for all England funding, so these will be the same for Awards for All as well. Alongside the 3 main England priorities, we'll also continue to prioritise proposals which respond to the crisis. So we can support groups to continue to deliver activity that responds to the immediate crisis or recovery, or groups that want to change, adapt and become more resilient to respond to future challenges. We'll also prioritise organisations that share our equalities, diversity and inclusion principles. We also want to know what your organisation's approach to EDI is as well, and to understand your approach to equalities from accessibility to participant and decision making. Therefore, we expect your organisation and the activities we fund to be open and accessible as well, and to promote equalities and challenge discrimination. So this is why we particularly welcome applicants from organisations that support LGBTQ+ and Black and minority ethnic communities, and those working with old or disabled people as well. So moving on to the difference that your project will make, this is something that we often refer to as impact. So we fund projects that work to make positive changes in their community, and it's important for organisations to demonstrate the difference they want to make in a community, including who will benefit and how. You know, how is an organisation going to achieve their aims and outcomes of a project? It needs to be sort of very clear in a proposal. And whilst it is good to see organisations looking to make a meaningful and lasting difference on communities, it's important that these changes are realistic, achievable and easy to measure as well. So here's a very simple example of measuring impact and showing the difference a project can make in practice. So imagine you're an organisation who's engaged with a community whose main issue is health, and they've said they'd like yoga classes to up their level of fitness. You'll probably record how many people come to each class, but that isn't the information we're interested in. What we want to know is what is the difference for those people attending those classes. So you might want to ask everyone when they first come to the class, how do you rate your fitness on a scale of 1 to 10? Would you try out the physical activities, that type of thing? Then ask again after 10 sessions, and you'll be able to see the difference and be able to say that 50% of people feel fitter and 75% of people would now try other activities. Like I said, this is a very basic example of what impact could look like for an organisation, but obviously this will look different for so many organisations and projects depending on the size, scale and complexity of it. So moving on to our sort of main funding offers. So our main responsive programmes are Awards for All and Reaching Communities. And these are the same programmes that operated before our short-term emergency COVID grants last summer, just with a few small changes. All of our open programmes can be found on our website as well. Obviously more information on Awards for All and Reaching Communities, but also any other live programmes that we have on at the time as well. And we would encourage applicants to submit through the online portal unless you have specific communication requirements. If that is the case, just get in touch with Action Together or even myself, make them aware of those communication requirements, and we can work a way for you to submit that best suits you. So I'll talk a little bit about Awards for All. So this is our most popular programme in England that supports smaller grassroots organisations, and it's managed by our team in Newcastle, so it's a sort of centralised management side of it. And for this funding programme, organisations can apply for grants that are from £300 up to £10,000 for 1 year. You can apply at any time, but you can only have one award in any 12 months. It's all online using a response to one question, and it's actually a quicker process than Reaching Communities. You usually get a final decision within 12 weeks of submitting your application. So moving on to reaching communities and partnerships then, like I said earlier, this is managed by our regional teams, and this is the one that I work on. So the rest of the presentation is going to be more focused on this. And reaching communities is aimed at organisations and communities with an aspiration to work on larger proposals. So with this programme, you can expect us to be flexible and responsive to communities' needs. So with this, you know, whether you need longer term or short term funding, whether your request is for a particular activity or create more fundamental change, or whether the funding is to support a single organisation or to bring organisations together. We can, like I said, we can fund for the short term, but we also offer long-term support. We can support organisations with activity as well as core costs. We can fund the expansion of existing projects as well as the development of new ways of working. We can cover costs for sharing learning and showing impact, and we can support organisations to adjust to the new normal and focus on financial, strategic or operational planning and restructure. So here's just a brief overview of the application process. So you'd start by going online, going on the website, checking your eligibility, and then submitting the application via the portal. Once you've done that, you'd then receive an unsuccessful email or a request for extra information. If you do get this request for extra information, you'd then submit that extra info to your funding officer, and your funding officer would then set up a meeting for you to discuss sort of the next stages of the application process, any additional questions that they might have, as well as any additional questions that you might have, and to just go over them together. Once you've done that, your funding officer would then do a full assessment on your application, and then confirm with you that you're happy for it to be taken to a decision-making panel. And then once that's done, you then await a final decision. So now we're going to look at who can apply, and this is relevant for sort of awards for and reaching communities as well. It's the same eligibility criteria. So you can apply if your organisation is a voluntary or community organisation, a registered charity, constitute group or club, or a not-for-profit company or community interest company. We also welcome applications from groups supporting communities who we haven't been able to reach sufficiently previously, organisations who traditionally have had poorer funding outcomes, and organisations who have been or will be disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Unfortunately, we can't accept applications from individuals and sole traders, companies that can pay profits to directors, shareholders or members, organisations that are based outside of the UK, organisations that don't have at least 2 trustees who are married, in a civil partnership, long-term relationship, living at the same address or related by blood, and one organisation can't apply on behalf of another. So these are the questions that are included on the online form. I won't go through them one by one, but you can have a little read of them. And as well as these questions here, we've also added a few more questions on the online form. So we now ask for a little bit more information about the number of staff and volunteers at the organisation, including the level of lived experience within the management and the types of communities that you support. And we also ask for information about the main and senior contact a lot earlier now as well. So once you've completed your initial application and submitted the form, we'll be back in touch within 12 weeks, either to let you know that you've been unsuccessful or to ask you for more information. So yeah, if your application is eligible and it fits well with our priorities, we'll ask you for some more information, kind of just building up what you've already told us from your initial application, but with a few more questions around your budget, your financial position, and like I said, just a little bit more detail about your proposal. There's no deadlines with our applications as well. You can develop your application at your own pace, and we're happy to work around your timeframes and your schedule. And if you need any extra help along the way, please do get in touch with your funding officer if you're not sure on something in the guidance, or you've just got any question about the application process at all. It's all part of that conversationalist approach that we have, so please just get in touch with your local funding officer and shout if you need a hand with anything. You can also tell us about your proposal in your own format as well. It doesn't have to be in a Word document if that's not your strength or not how you prefer to work. You can put it in a PowerPoint, you can do it in PDF packs, and some organisations even tell us about their proposal in a film. It's completely up to you. We'll also let you know if there's any information that we need. Our assessment is not just based on what you provide us on the portal or on a piece of paper, but it's also built around conversations that we have as well. So if we've got any questions about something in your proposal that we're not too sure on, or we maybe don't quite understand, or we want to know more information about something, we'll get in touch and let you know if there's anything else we need. And like I said earlier, the information we ask for will depend on the complexity and the scale of your proposal. So yeah, once we've got all the information we need and you're happy that you've given us everything that you feel like you can to support your application, we'll then confirm with you that you're happy for it to be assessed, and then you get your final decision within 12 weeks of that. Just a little bit about safeguarding as well. So if your proposal involves working with children, young people or vulnerable adults, you need to have a policy in place that explains how they'll be safe. And this needs to take into account the different ways of working as a result of the pandemic, making particular reference to online activities as well. And you need to ensure that all your policies, practices and staff training are all up to date. Although we do want to know that you've got a sort of robust safeguarding policy in place, the fund isn't we're not in a position to advise you on what is a good safeguarding policy and what isn't. The type of policy that you choose is completely up to you and dependent on what's best for your organisation. But if you see on this slide, the NSPCC and NCBO, as well as Action Together, will have a lot of really useful resources for you to tap into if you need support with that. And then, yeah, just quickly about information about if you're successful. So if you are successful and you're awarded funding, your funding officer will set up a grant induction with you to go over sort of any terms and conditions that you might have questions about, and to talk about official start dates and payment dates as well. And like I said earlier, we offer the same level of flexibility in grant management as we do in assessment. We do really keep that conversationalist approach and encourage groups to be open and honest about the progress of their project, both in annual monitoring reports, but also in any informal catch-ups that we may have. It's all about just keeping each other in the loop 100% of the time. And if there's any changes that come up, good or bad, just letting us know, just by dropping us an email or giving us a quick ring. We're always happy to chat with our grant holders and hear about the work that they're doing. So please don't be afraid to do that. Yeah, so that's it for the presentation, really. If you'd like to find out any more information on anything I've sort of mentioned today, please do have a look at our website, or ring the advice line. Their numbers on this page. But please do get in touch with the team at Action Together for support. And if they can't help you, they can signpost you onto me or someone else in our team who'll be happy to help as well. So yeah, now on to questions. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone.
Just before we go on to questions, when we do go on to questions, I'll stop recording. But just as Georgie said, that for those of you who do want to apply, we do encourage you to get in touch with your local Action Together Community Development Officer, because we can provide that support, whether it's looking at your governance, some of the policies that Georgie mentioned, we can have a look at them to make sure that they're suitable and comprehensive enough for National Lottery funding. We can look at your Quality in Action Award, which is where we can look at all of your policies as a whole to get them up to scratch for funding purposes, and also check over your form and you know, as sort of a critical friend, really, we can do that as well. So we would encourage you to do that.
Definitely, yeah.
So I'm going to stop recording now.
Stress how good Action Together are both supporting.
I'll stop recording now and then open up